Hello, my name is Vincent Beswick-Escanlar. Thanks for joining for this module on Canadian perspectives in global health, or with middle power comes middle responsibility. I'm recording this presentation in Ottawa on the traditional lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, who have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land that Canadians of all ancestries share as equals today. I have the usual sorts of caveats for this presentation. Although I'm here in uniform and recording this in our defense headquarters, nothing here is the official policy or perspective of Government of Canada. Everything here is a range of representative material selected for academic purposes. I don't have any conflicts of interest, and I don't get any money from anyone that influences today's presentation. I also want to credit my fellow USU grads and global health engagers, Lieutenant Colonel Carlo Rossi and Lieutenant Commander Ernie Ebert, whose conversations and feedback helped shape this talk. Any errors are mine alone, of course. As an introduction, I'm a specialist physician in public health and preventive medicine. I started out as a family doctor, trained as a flight surgeon for search and rescue, deployed on ship into Afghanistan and a few other places doing things that could be considered GHE, though as you all know by now, that's often debatable. I did my specialty training at USU with a bit of focus on global health, and I guess I did all right enough for Professor Colonel Brad Bodick to let me chat with you today. I also did an internship in our foreign ministry here in Canada as a medical advisor. I hope that over the next few minutes, you'll get a bit of background to be able to consider a few questions. How do domestic politics influence diplomacy and defense? How do middle powers use these to advance their national interest? How do they use global health specifically? Is this different from the great powers? And how? Is the relationship different between the aided and middle versus great powers? And what's the place for bilateral versus multilateral engagement? I'll start with a little intro about Canada. Anyone can miss Canada, all tucked away down there. So a little intro to Canada. We like to think that we have a reputation for being generally nice people. Apparently, there are recurring studies of people around the world who figure that Canadians want to be liked and want to help. And I think that's actually fairly true. So our government or politicians know how to appeal to this national identity of wanting to help. When our current Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau from the Liberal Party, was elected in 2015, his foreign policy premise was that Canada is back on the world stage. The implication being that his predecessor, the Right Honourable Stephen Harper from the Conservative Party, somehow withdrew Canada from the global community. We'll look at that in a bit more detail, but what this means is that how Canadian foreign policy is framed nowadays is very malleable and heavily driven by domestic politics. If Canadians generally want to help, where politicians send that help can be tailored to appeal to its voter base back home. So here's how Canada's foreign aid is sold nowadays. Coming to the rescue in crises, food is the best vaccine against chaos, a clear focus on women and children, being a partner for a better world, and special attention to gender equity, her voice, her choice, and being a leader in advancing sexual health, reproductive rights, and combating gender-based violence. Like other international engagement, global health activities are also an exercise in national branding, and we see that at work here. That branding is key to addressing this existential angst about Canadian identity and our place in the world stage. As a middle power, and I'll expand on that definition shortly, taking leading roles as a global actor and holding the attention of the great powers is a way for us to advance our own interests. Getting star billing means getting bigger roles in the future and wins the loyalty of a bigger audience. It's how we validate ourselves to the global community. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we get a temporary seat in Security Council, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get good deals on a trade deal, sometimes we don't, and so on. It's the eternal struggle for us Canadians, at least from a foreign relations perspective. This might seem a bit abstract, but we've always had identity issues of some sort. We were founded by both England and France on land that was already the territory of dozens of Indigenous states. Nowadays, of course, it's simply a matter of fact that le français is an official language and Her Majesty is our head of state. But sharing North America with the world's largest superpower, the United States, means we're always attentive to not just becoming the 51st state. Truly, being distinct from Americans is a bit of a national pastime of ours. When you look at all the patriotic myths or stereotypes about Canada, and remember there's always some truth to stereotypes, you can pretty much imagine all of them as being the opposite of Americans. Canadians have a very subdued form of patriotism. And for Americans, Canadians are moderates, again, Americans. There are flip sides to all of these as to whether they are actually good things or not. You can see the counter arguments there on the right. But the clincher there is at the bottom, that we might convince ourselves that although Canadian society is similar to the United States, we are superior because of the uniquely Canadian qualities mentioned above. But then again, maybe we're so blindly and obsessively anti-American. Basically, we were founded the same day you guys were, 4th of July, 1776, by not declaring independence with you, that we're doubling down on all these stereotypes in what we do. So being the original anti-Americans, we have to have different names for things. Government aid for us is handled in a similar way as the US. Our lead ministry is Global Affairs Canada, which is our version of the Department of State. GAC mostly works through NGOs by funding them so they do the actual heavy lifting. There are about 2,000 such NGOs in Canada, 14,000 employees with about $5 billion in aid a year. Analogous to USAID, we had the Canadian International Development Agency. Its mandate was to support sustainable development in developing countries in order to reduce poverty and contribute to a more secure, equitable, and prosperous world. This was dissolved into GAC in 2013, similar to the UK Department for International Development, which was dissolved into the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in 2020. Critics believe that this increased politicization of aid to suit partisan goals. Under our conservatives, it tied development to economic interest. Under our liberals, it tied aid to specific initiatives that matched its domestic agenda, like being seen to improve abortion access. Analogous to the global health security strategy in the States, we have this blank space. There's some interest in having a global health strategy, but it's very niche and academic. The effect is that there is no written long-term strategy or benchmarks, which means that the door is open to more politicization of foreign development and in turn, global health. More on that in a moment. For convenience, here's a slide with some bottom line key points we've just discussed.